Good evening. Happy Thursday. How was everyone? Uh, Wanted to. We went into the intro first because our guest wasn't here yet, but our guest is here, so I'm going to bring him on and then introduce him. Hold on one second there. There he is.
There I
Hello,
am.
sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm just going to change the layout. Give me 2 seconds. There we go.
Ta-da.
It's been a while.
It has been. It was like 5 years. I
Yeah.
look back.
I went back and I looked at watched a little bit of the YouTube that we did, and it said 4 years ago, and I'm like, damn.
Oh,
It's hard to
yeah.
believe. Yeah, it's hard to
So
believe.
we're going on, we're talking without even introducing everyone. Dr. Laurence Brock.
Yep.
It's been a while. He is I forgot that we had spiritual counselor on the YouTube that we did.
Yeah.
Is that still kind of?
I'm always trying to figure out exactly how to describe what I do, but sometimes
Aren't we all?
Therapist, sometimes spiritual healer, sometimes counselor. So yes, all those things are true.
All around magic man.
So
Yeah.
So doctor, I'm going over the previous interview, and it brought me back to everything, made everything familiar with me again. And I did enjoy that interview a lot. And the subject of energy healing has come up a few times in the last month to year. And we kept saying, we're going to cover it. We're going to bring someone on.
Yep.
We're going to cover it. But we couldn't think of anyone. And then I don't know why I forgot all about the cable access interview. And I said,
Yeah.
here we go. This is the perfect person to bring on. So we're going to go through the whole thing again. And I like to start because I was listening to that interview and it reminded me of your kind of progression. As a younger person, how were you raised? What was your religious beliefs? What's your background?
Well, I was born in a Jewish family. I mean, I went to Hebrew school and was bar mitzvahed, but it wasn't such a strong belief inside me. It's just kind of, you just do what your parents did. You know what I mean?
But at that point, what was your beliefs as far as, did you believe in God? Did you believe in a higher power and spirits?
I probably did, but not in a way like I do now, like I know it. Back then, I just went along with my parents, and went to Hebrew school. Even at Hebrew school at a young age, the only thing that really interested me are some of those mystical, magical things in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I would sit in the back of the class. It was funny because there was this big tree out the window, and the teacher was so absorbed in the book, some kids would climb out the window and down the tree class, and then come back. And that was more interesting than most of, but there were certain stories in the Bible. One that really stood out was for Hanukkah, where they, the story is there was only enough oil to burn the candle for one day, and it lasted for 8 days. And I just remember that was one of the things, like this energy opened up in me,
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. Again, the thing it's the same, I think, with a lot of people. My religious upbringing was Catholic as well. It was Catholic, and my siblings all went to Catholic school. I didn't, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And my mother, up until the time she passed to COVID 3 years ago, would get frustrated with me because whenever we would go to weddings, funerals, any kind of church ceremony, which I didn't go at all, I still don't know the Our Father prayer to this day. At 55 years old, I get about halfway through it. Forgive us and then I'm done.
I know it. He doesn't want to learn.
And then I kind of nod and mumble my way through the rest to the amen. But anyway, I get sidetracked. So Dr. Brock is one of the few people who we wanted to cover near-death experiences as well as energy healing.
Yeah.
And he is one of the few people who kind of fits both of that. So we're going to talk kind of both subjects and go back and forth.
Yeah.
You did have a near-death experience when you were younger.
I did. Yeah. When I was 22 in 1976. So it was years ago. And so I was at a party, drinking, getting high. And I actually, it's not cute, but it's kind of cute because not cute. it got crashed.
I've never heard drunken and getting high and getting in an accident
Yeah.
and
Well,
cute in the same sentence.
I was at a party and I kind of made up the story that I was too high to drive, so I could leave my car there and go back the next day and flirt with the girl who was having the party.
Okay.
So that's the cute part. And then I had been living in Colorado and I came back to the Northeast to visit my parents. And I had my friend drive me, and almost back to my parents' house, I realized my sister needed the car the next day. So I had him drive me back to the party. I remember going into the party. I mean, it was crowded, music, people dancing, really a happening party. And I remember a little bit going through the crowd to tell her I was going to take my car, and a little bit going to leave the crowd. I don't remember walking out of the house. I remember I have vague glimpses of walking, along the path in front of the house. Then the next thing I know, I was out of my body looking down. The car there was smashed. My body was leaning against a tree with the legs out like this, and a
Oh my
police
God.
officer was crouching over me. Yeah.
So again, I've talked to two people. You're one of them who has had a near death experience. The out of body, are you real time? Are you seeing everything real time? Only you're looking at yourself. Could you see and hear everything that's going on in those moments?
It seemed like it. It wasn't for that long, and I saw the police officer crouching over me. Then my attention became, so I was in this white light.
Right.
There was like these different shades of white light. So I was looking this way, definitely seeing my body. I don't know if you look, the scar's still there, and my head was cracked open, but it seemed fine. Behind me, there was this like a full silhouette of a man, and they're all different shades of white. So I was in white, there's a big circle of white, and then the silhouette was white, all different shades. And it, I'm always trying to think of how to describe it, because it didn't seem it when I tell the story, it only takes up like a minute, but it seemed longer than that, but it didn't seem like years, like some people say. And then the being behind me said, but it was, even in my physical life, I'm very kinesthetic. I like feel things. That's the way even when I park my car, I need to remember to look, because I just kind of feel where my car is and think I could find it. And then sometimes
I do that too, I think.
Yeah. So, but then the being behind me said, you have to go back. Your father wants you to stay. I knew right at that moment that the father was not my physical father. It was God, Father. So,
do you remember, because again, a lot of the people that go through this say similar types of things.
yeah.
I'm just curious, again, for my own curiosity, outside your body, while this is going on, emotionally, is there panic? Is there tranquility? Is there love? Do you remember the feeling of any of that?
The closest thing is love. When I see my daughter sometimes, and I just love her, and there's no thought to it. It's all the things you're talking about. There's some thought. It's just like knowing a good way to describe it is like knowing all the answers, but there's no questions, and knowing that things are just good. I was fine that my head was cracked open, and people say, could you have not come back? I don't know. I didn't even think of that. Everything just seemed so good. I just went back into my body, and then I came to a few days later in the hospital.
So the normal emotion that you would think, because I was in a wreck like that, where
Yeah.
my head was cracked open and there was blood everywhere, and the feeling that I got was I'm dying. I thought there was blood everywhere. I felt my chest had like caved in or whatever. I just said, this is how it ends. But from your perspective of going through that, there wasn't even, that's what I mean. You sort of unplug.
Well, it seems obvious I fell asleep, so I didn't really consciously experience any of that. And all I saw was from that spiritual perspective. And it wasn't like whoopee whoopee. It was just everything was peaceful and everything kind of made sense in a way. And when I even say that, I start to feel my energy lift up, and I've learned to connect into that. And when I came back, something happened. My hands started to become warm when I touch people, and it still happens some, but I kind of have control over it now. When back then I didn't. And a few things happened. Even how I describe it, I learned, I mean, so many, synchronicities happen. One thing is, so I was living in Colorado. I came back to visit. That's when that happened. After I got out of the hospital, when I was well enough, I went back to Colorado. My mom kind of bribed me and bought me a new car to come back and go into my dad's business in the Northeast. And one day I was sitting in my apartment and this woman shows up, and she was the sister of a good friend of mine that I knew. And she said, "My sister told me some cool things about you, and I know someone who teaches what happens after we die, and I want to introduce you to him."
Wow.
So she introduced me to this teacher who is a Sufi sheikh of the Mevlevi dervishes, and they follow the teachings of Jalaluddin Rumi, like Rumi the poet. And he just started talking to me about some of these things. So I needed to know this guy, and I ended up spending as much time as I could over the next 10 years with him, sometimes traveling, sometimes just studying remotely. But it was before the internet, so there was none of that stuff going on. But he started to talk to me about Mary and how Mary was so open to God's love. And when he said that, and still I feel like a little, kind of chills inside, that love that she had for God, that's what I felt in my near-death experience.
So did your perspective on life and religion and everything change after that? Was it kind of like that affirmation of there is a God, there is something beyond?
Or maybe he developed the belief.
Right. That's
Well,
what
before
Well,
he
it
just
didn't
followed,
happen.
and then he had his own
Again,
thoughts.
there was no internet. I had never heard a near-death experience. It wasn't like I knew what had happened, but I didn't know to make sense of it. And then I started studying with this guy, and he talked about that. I mean, in a certain way, I look back, I'm just kind of naive. I still am, because some things happened even before my near-death experience that were. So I saw my grandfather after he passed away in a movie theater, and this was before my near-death experience, and it was definitely him. He was a unique-looking guy, big guy, 6'4", 300 pounds, and he always wore this really nice suit and a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, which back in the 1970s was not a normal thing in New York City at all.
No.
Nowadays, you wouldn't think twice of it, but so I was in the theater sitting like, facing the screen on the right side, and I saw this guy from the back. I was with some friends, and I just said, "Oh, we should go out that way. I think that's quicker just to get a look." And I walked in front of him. It was him.
Wow.
And I just kept walking. I didn't do anything. Now I would have gone and talked to him, but
So
I didn't.
he didn't say anything to you in the dream or anything. You just walked by him.
It wasn't a dream. It was physical waking. He looked as solid as a real person.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So what's strange again? I mentioned this in our interview as well. The people that are watching that know us know that I'm a skeptic, and I mentioned this to you during the interview.
Yeah.
And there are people in the field that are.
I'm a skeptic also, because there's so many people that are full of it out there, kind of saying this stuff.
And there are people in the field that are out there, way out there. And you're never sure about someone, but I had watched interviews with you previous to our interviews, and quantum physics came up, that you had studied quantum physics and had an understanding of them. And that made me go, this isn't just some guy making stuff up about spirit guides and spirits and heaven. This is a guy who really knows the science side as well as the supernatural or religious side. So I wanted to just say that to the people watching, if you don't know who he is.
I'm skeptical. Even when almost every time I have a session beforehand, I wonder how I'm even going to help this person. And then when I'm doing it, it kind of starts to happen, and it is very miraculous.
So let's get into that side of it, because I watched the interview again. What even made you lean in that direction of energy healing? Because I know in the beginning, I watched the interview again, you were using different kinds of mechanical devices.
Yeah.
What even made you go down that path?
It's this ongoing story of, in one way, the thing that made me really just do long distance healing all the time was when my daughter got to be a certain age and her mom went back to work. I felt like I should stay at home more. So I had an office in Manhattan and an office in Stamford, Connecticut. And I kind of got sick of commuting and I wanted to be home for my daughter. So I just started trying. Back then it was on the phone and it seemed to work and no one was complaining. And, I do this to make a living. So I had to keep making money, which kept happening. So.
But what were the first types of, like, how did you even know that this was even something that's even possible? Like, how do you even?
Yeah.
I mean, other than your hands warmed up in the beginning.
Right. Well, in the very beginning, a couple of things happened. One is a friend of mine twisted his ankle and something in me just got my hands to reach for his ankle. And it went from hurting to not hurting like that. And again, see, now you'd think healing abilities, but it was all kind of confusing to me, to tell you the truth. The other thing that happened was my next door neighbor growing up. So I knew our families were close. So there was someone my age, the father, and then the grandfather. And the father was telling me that his father, the grandfather, was about to pass away very soon. And he was very sick. And I'd known him, since I was very young. And I said, and I remember because it almost felt like I was joking around. I said, I'll pray for him, kind of in an almost sarcastic voice, but I did. And I felt something happen. I mean, I felt this energy come in and something it's just like things kind of shift. And then the next time I saw him, he said, and it was pretty cool of him to be open to even this concept, to tell you the truth. He said, I think something happened when you prayed, because later that day he went from, he ended up living a few months more when he was about to pass away. And he said he went from, basically being kind of unconscious to being awake and happy and stuff. So that was a clue, but still it didn't click in my head. I mean, it still kind of doesn't click in my head. That's the thing, like I said.
But you mentioned is it a feeling? I mean, what is it? Is it physically? Is it spiritually? Is it emotionally? What are you feeling when you're doing?
Well, so for me, the first thing really was my hands on. So the praying obviously is not, it just felt like this whoosh, and something kind of shifted. But, as I've studied, and I studied with that Sufi sheikh and other people, I've learned, I studied body work, I studied different kinds of healing and learned to develop it more and have more a knowing of how to do it. So it's something kind of like when I see someone, I can just see this really good thing in them, and it's in them, and then it's up here also. And then I can kind of see things that are in the way. Sometimes I get very concrete information about what it is. It could be something from their childhood. There are times there are negative things in the spirit, like ghosts and entities and demons that are there, and they leave. Like the other day, I just saw this. It was almost like a square, but not quite. But it was red, and it just left someone. And so sometimes I see things like that. Sometimes it looks more like almost a human shape.
So a person like what you're describing, did they come to you with an issue, or did you just see this in them?
This is when they come to me for.
And what are they saying? That there's something wrong with me, that I'm feeling sick, or give me an example of like that situation.
Right. Well, sometimes it's physically sick. Sometimes it's. I talked to someone today, and in a certain way, I say, "Why are you even talking to me? Your life's so good." It's like they're just not feeling fulfilled, even though they're doing all these good things. That they live in a nice house. They're talking about skiing in Colorado, things like that. It's like most people would hear it and go, "Wow, what a great life," but this person's feeling kind of blah inside. So, but it's some people, business stuff, relationships. It could be pretty much anything, really.
So it's not just physical; it can be emotional, mental issues as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Huh. And you've seen it work.
It works. It's amazing. A couple of months ago, I was kind of complaining to myself that I hadn't seen a physical miracle in a while, which even that I'm saying that to myself, it's kind of funny, right? You're laughing, but that's what it's like.
Yeah.
And then like a day or two later, I got a text from someone who had one session with me, and I could tell so sometimes there's just a lot of energy comes in. It's a certain color. A lot of times yellow is very healing.
No, well, can I stop you there?
Yeah.
What does that mean? You're seeing the color yellow connected to someone, or
Yeah.
you're okay.
So sometimes it looks to like if I'm doing it on Zoom, sometimes I just see the yellow around them.
Okay,
Sometimes
like
it
an
could be,
aura type of thing.
kind of like that, but it's a little different than the aura because this
Okay.
would not be the same. Usually the aura is kind of a somewhat like a shape like our body, but this was filling up their apartment. And
Okay.
she was even complaining about the energy where she lived, but she sent me this text saying something shifted, and she didn't really feel that much during the session. She said something shifted, or the energy shifted, and I've been able to walk, and I hadn't been able to walk in 8 years.
Wow.
And she sent me this video of her walking, and she's using 2 canes, and she can go to the supermarket in the cart. And before that, for a long time, she was just in her apartment.
See, like people would attribute this, like, again, as a skeptic, you hear about things like this, and you think of those guys that are up on stage and I'm going to do a healing, and they rap, and all of a sudden people are up dancing and stuff like that. It's really hard to wrap your brain around the fact that someone is capable. But you know what you're sitting in your seat.
But think about the fact that we're talking about somebody who hasn't walked in 8 years. Now you can't not walk for 8 years, then all of a sudden just get up and do, because obviously your muscles atrophy. There's a lot of things involved physically, but the emotional.
I don't think she was not walking at all, but I think she was just like getting around her house.
She just wasn't doing it.
Getting a cane, or I don't know exactly, because when I got that, I was very skeptical. Then a couple of days later, I got a much fuller description, and she sent this video of her walking, like she was walking outside. She goes, I'm walking like an hour every day, so it seemed a little more realistic.
Do you think that part of it is you are triggering the more positive aspect, like you're giving somebody a different outlook, like say someone who's depressed, and somehow you can click that button that gives them a little bit, lighten them up so they're not so depressed, that they can start getting back into slowly pulling themselves out of that to get better?
There is some of that, but it is these positive things in us that I consider like gifts from God, and they just get activated. However it is, right? All those things. I don't, in one way, people haven't said it in a long time, but people used to say, how do you know it's not all in their head? And I'd say, I don't really care. If they get better, what's the difference?
Exactly.
I had someone recently who was having trouble breathing, and she had a few sessions, because after the first one, she felt so much better. And she went, because she had some sort of growths in both her lungs, and she went to the doctor and got an MRI, and in one lung, the growths were gone.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool.
So 2 questions that I have. You had made a comment on one of your interviews about you were seeing it spiritually. What does that mean to you when you use that phrase? What does that mean?
Seeing things spiritually?
Right.
Well, it's some of it is, that's what I do. It's, and you could think of how do you describe it, but that's how I describe it. So I see. So sometimes it just looks like an energetic thing, and I don't even know. It's almost like an abstract painting. Sometimes I see very specific things. Sometimes I see things leaving people's body. Like I said, it almost looks like a person, like a demon from a movie. There was one time, and it was before the bad guy in Star Wars after Darth Vader. I don't even remember his name, but it was for that movie came out, but it looked just like that with the red and black all over.
Darth Maul. I'm a nerd. Yeah. I know it.
So that's exactly what it looked like. And it was like that. So in that case, this person was pretty sick. She came to me for the electronic devices. She didn't know I did the spiritual thing, and this happened. So I was working on her. She actually blacked out. Wow. And I had to hold her up, because using that device, people are usually sitting up. And then I saw this thing leave her body, and I poured some water in her mouth. She came to, she ran to the bathroom. She, threw up and had diarrhea and stuff. And then I didn't even know if I should tell her about that. Eventually I did, but part of it was she just felt so much better. And that, I was surprised she even came back after that, because But
So you saw the thing leave her,
yes.
and then what? It just evaporated, or just?
It just went up. I was looking at her to tell you, I didn't even, no one's ever asked me that. I don't know what happened to it.
I mean, that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing too. I want to go back to the device because we talked about this during the last interview that we did. What is the purpose of the device? You keep mentioning that. What does it do?
This device it's kind of a combination of a biofeedback machine and electrical stimulation. But this one, it's a Russian invention that's a little more sophisticated than most. Like, it's this little device, and it costs, back those years, it cost $3,000. So, but it's sending two signals. It reads different electrical signals in the body, and there's protocols for pretty much everything. A lot of the protocols, some of them are based on Tibetan acupuncture. There's some things based on zone therapy. So these were medical doctors that created this device. It was part of the Russian space program, and they were looking for some way to have, something where they could travel in space and heal without having to bring, like a whole drugstore, basically.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And the device, we were talking about this before. What exactly are you looking for with the device? You're looking for problem areas, and how do you know where they are?
So if there's a way, one of the things is you put it on like this big. It looks kind of like a remote control, really. There's metal on it where the electricity, it feels the body, and you put it on the spine and you go like this, and you see where the numbers are really different. You're hoping to find some place where the numbers are very high, and that means the body's actively healing that area, and then there's ways to support it. There's other ways where you can move it along the skin, and in some places it'll be what's called sticky, and that's a concept that's in acupuncture. So but it feels like the device pulls, and it makes a louder sound. And so then there's ways to deal with that, to get the energy. You want the energy moving in in each direction the same. So you kind of go like this is one, like this, and up and sideways, and see which it's different. And there's ways to get it to be.
But you know what I love about this? I'm not a big believer in Reiki, to be honest with
you.
I'm just not. And Reiki I've had it. I've seen it done. And please, if anybody's out there watching me that does this and is a master, I'm not trying to offend you or discredit anything I'm just speaking for me personally. It looks like a bunch of just show. You know what I mean? People are doing this and they're doing that. But what fascinates me about you, and I think I remember that first interview again, the device you're talking about, science. It has science behind it.
Right. Yeah.
And I love that because you're actively looking over the body for these areas of distress based on, the electronic impulses or whatever the body is sending to those areas because it's in distress and it's trying to heal it the best it can. What do you do after you locate those areas of concern during those early days? What were you doing? The
theory about that, there's something called the healing cycle. And so you want your whole system to be going around this healing cycle plus every part. And what happens is it can get stuck somewhere or do what's called an aberrant cycle where it's going like this instead of like this. So you're basically encouraging, so it sends an electrical signal in the body, and it sends it through the nervous system to the brain, and it kind of reminds the body to heal that.
Okay.
So our body will start conserving energy as soon as there's not an emergency, to save energy in case there's another emergency that comes. And sometimes it starts, I joke around and say, being lazy before it really needs to, and stops healing parts of the body. So this kind of reminds the body to start healing, and then gives it energy to support that, so it doesn't feel like
almost sounds like an electrical flush.
It's kind of like, it could be like that. Yeah.
But what are you doing on your end? Because you said your hands are warm. At this point back then, are you laying hands on, or are you?
The device is separate than the hands on. So when I also studied polarity therapy, which is very kind of like acupressure, but very gentle, and deep connective tissue massage. So I don't work with people in person too much anymore, but there's someone I do go see. And one, her spine was like this. It was all twisted and now it's straight. It is so, it's still, I know that what I do can do that. So I did, and it is kind of spiritual releasing and emotional releasing. And I didn't know what I was going to do with this person because I didn't, like, it happens a lot. I don't know directly what to do to get things to heal, but I know that I've done it so many times. So it's kind of like if I stick my nose in there, I know something good's going to happen. But now and one time I went there and her spine was straight. And for a week, I'd see her once a week. For weeks, I kept checking because I'd go home and I couldn't even believe it. It's really cool.
Do you ever talk to like medical doctors, and do you know any?
Once in a while, I do, yes.
And how does that conversation go?
Some doctors are open to it. Like, I mean, more of the time I work on someone and then a doctor tells the person like, so, you're doing so good, or, one time I remember I was working on someone, they were diagnosed with something in their liver. I don't even remember what it was, but they came back in the next time and said, oh, the doctor said he made a mistake. But
what?
Because there was no sign of it.
You told the story of a pregnant woman as well. Could you?
That was she had a miscarriage, and that, for me personally, that was a big step towards accepting what I do. Because, I am skeptical. I don't want to take things for granted. Like, to me, it needs to be real. You know what I mean? And so this woman came to see me. So she had a miscarriage, and her health was failing after that. And the doctor said, forget about ever having a kid. We're not sure we're able to save you at this point. And her friend kind of forced her to come see me because she didn't believe in what I do at all. And after 2 sessions, I got this email from her saying, I don't know what you do, but the doctor said I'm getting better. And as soon as I saw her, I knew that I could help her. So this was more hands-on stuff. And sometimes I just get a feeling of where to put my hands, and then I feel the heat. And sometimes there's some vibrating there. And so then I heard, like a year later, from the friend that she was pregnant and she ended up having a son. The thing that really...
She better have named that kid Laurence.
And I do, when I'm doing it, it all just seems normal. When I'm not doing it, it does seem unbelievable. And it's so after, I started. So something that happened when I started posting things on Facebook was I was teaching some classes at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut about meditation and breathing and mindfulness. And after the class, the woman said, oh, I'm teaching a class about death and dying. And by then I had heard of near-death experiences, but I didn't know it was like a big thing. So I said to her, I had a near-death experience. She said, oh, you need to come teach my class. And well, she was so excited. So I put something on Facebook, I'm going to teach this class about death and dying. And, I had a near-death experience, and so many people said, wow, I'm so interested. But so then I started posting things online. I realized, oh, this is a good way to get business, and after that, when I was looking a couple of years later, it was around Thanksgiving. So I'm looking for things to remind myself what to be thankful for. And I was looking at the same time for things to post. And I came across the email from this woman, and it was like, I just got it, that I do this cool thing, in a way where, like, I am skeptical, but I was almost kind of ashamed of it. I was afraid to talk to people about it. And that was a really big step in me going, I do this thing, I should embrace the gift. And it's so that was probably more of the story for me. Is I really started to embrace it. And she has a son. It's so cool.
So do you know right away? I mean, do you need multiple sessions with people, or do you know right away? Do you wait for feedback, or do you know it, that whatever you're doing worked?
Well, I know when something changes in someone, but sometimes people don't feel it right away.
Okay.
The other day I had someone, and I don't know how many times she's come to me, but she's in England. So I love it when it's really far away. And I could see something happening with her, but she kept saying, I don't really feel anything. And sometimes I really admire those people that they stick with it with me, you know.
Right.
And then last time I saw her, I could tell she was feeling it. And I said, "You're feeling better." And she goes, "Yeah, but I don't know what happened." And I said, "Well, you had all those sessions." And she was, you know, she didn't have any physical ailments, but she was feeling really down, even though she had a pretty good life, you know.
So
she,
when you're doing this, I imagine before internet, you were doing it over the phone, or were you not doing it then?
I was doing it over the phone for a while. So over the pandemic, you know, people really started wanting to do
So
videos a lot more.
what is the process remotely? Am I closing my eyes? Am I doing anything on my end to allow this energy, or is it you're just doing everything?
Sometimes people are closing their eyes and I don't talk. A lot of times I have to kind of distract people from doing something because it's in one way what you know. If you're sick, you don't know how to be better, and you're in a certain pattern, and then it's like, and then there's the people who kind of do spiritual stuff and they've done a lot of stuff to try to heal, but it's not working. So it's all sometimes people are just closing their eyes and meditating, and sometimes it's uh, sometimes I'm talking. Sometimes I have to talk to people like I have an idea of what to talk about that will help them open up. So
Have
that's
you ever
important.
come across anybody that can do this or does something like what you can do?
Yes, I know people that can. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
Now you guys can ask questions. I know we're asking all the questions, but if I see any, I'll ask him if I read any on the comments. Here's my thing. What I would be, I don't know if the word concern is really appropriate,
Yeah.
but my thing would be if I say I could do what you do, I would be concerned that everyone who is suffering from things that are kind of, the really bad stuff,
Yeah.
cancer, really bad disabilities, um, you know, of any kind. I would be concerned that what if they come to me expecting the miracle?
Right.
Do you ever get that where somebody comes to you and you're just like, this is a severe case? What happens then?
Right. So I try to be honest with people, even though I like to talk about the one-time experiences. I, you know, say to people sometimes it takes longer. So, but most people within one session feel something. So
Okay,
when they feel something, then that's good.
but
Yeah.
total recovery is not guaranteed. I mean, if you have
No,
God forbid
there's no
cancer,
way to guarantee it, but I've seen people heal from things that medical doctors say is unhealable. And when things line up, there's a lot of different levels that things have to happen. And so when it all lines up, it someone I know described it like it's a big combination lock with a lot of numbers. If
right?
only a few of them are out, then it's easy to get them to heal. But sometimes it's more. But like this woman who I don't know how many sessions she had with me, but she just wasn't feeling it. I was kind of surprised, you know, when that happens. I really admire those people that they're coming back because something in them must feel it. You know what I mean? And then um, yes, I all the things you're thinking of. Yes, sometimes
Well,
people.
somebody asked about autism. Have you ever worked with people with autism?
I have, yes. So
Varying results, or
varying results, yes. So everything's kind of varying because it's definitely more of from a Western perspective where it's not I mean, an Eastern perspective as opposed to Western medicine where they're looking at the symptoms. There's part of it that things just open up and so this good thing in people. So so I just felt something shift right here. So and then I wonder what is that? Is the person who asked it or the person who they're talking about something might have shifted? And I don't really know. So I kind of have to check. But
okay,
sometimes like that. So, I mean, one time I worked with someone who was severely autistic, well, the kid, and the mother would come to me, and the kid came for quite a while, but the father didn't really want them to come see me. So it didn't go as long as I thought it should. But I saw something. He was very obsessed about computers, and his teachers, his psychiatrists, psychologists, everyone's keeping away from computers. And I saw, no, that's his expression. So they
right.
started teaching him, and he started creating music and art that was pretty cool. He
Wow.
didn't really heal all that much during that time. So Yes, sometimes things happen in one session. Sometimes it just takes a while.
Have you ever gotten people in all these years who have just said, look, you're not doing anything for me. This isn't working at all?
I've had some people say that, but it's there usually something happened. I mean, one time I had this person, and it was. I wish it worked out better because they were a famous person, and those really help your practice a lot. But I, during the session, they were like, "Wow, this is so good." They were feeling so good, so much energy, blah blah blah. And people that are famous, you have to kind of reach out to them and cater to them. So I called, and they said nothing happened. And it's like, what? Like during the session, so much was happening. And I don't know. There are all sorts of variations like you're thinking of. Yes, that happens.
Well, you had asked the question during the last interview. Do you feel like someone has to be a believer? Do they have to be all in what you're doing for it to work?
No, like that woman with the miscarriage, she didn't believe me at all. And there's I mean, I have fun stories for each thing. So there was this was actually in Connecticut. This kid, he was in his early 20s at the time. He was coming to see me. He had some problems with his liver, and his father was paying for it. And then his father, and I knew the father, and he wanted to come see, basically to come see what I was doing was prove that it was ridiculous, really, because he didn't believe it. And he came there. So I say this prayer at the beginning at what I call calling in the light. And I did that, and the room filled up with green light, and he saw it. And he goes, "What happened?" Everything just turned green. And he spent a long time trying to figure out, he was an engineer, and spent all this time trying to figure out, because there was big glass windows there and trees, and the light was coming through, and he realized, well, that's only in that corner of the room. And then after a while, I said, "I don't know what you do, but I feel so good, and I'll continue paying for it." So he got it somehow. He wasn't sick or anything. So
Deb wanted to know, besides the physical ailments, can you help with mental
No, I
as
asked
well?
them that already.
Well, Deb
yeah,
just came on.
again, anything, the answer is yes. So the way I'm naturally really good at psychological things, so that's kind of what I usually talk to people about, or spiritual things. So it's all about this energy openness and unfoldment and connecting to source or God, whatever you call that. That's what it's all about.
See, I love that, again, that you word it that way. I'll get into that in a minute. The other question I wanted to ask you, you were talking in the one interview about your mom had passed when you were how old?
It was in 1988, so 33.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, were you doing this by that time, or no? You hadn't started.
Kind of. Yes, a little bit. Yeah.
What does your family? Do you have kids? Your
I
parents?
have a 19-year-old daughter. I mean, kids these days are very open to it because shows like yours, there's everywhere. It's metaphysical things are everywhere. So, but she's had a lot of experiences with it, so she's very open to it.
What about friends? You ever go somewhere and someone's like, "Hey,
I have friends
thing going on with my elbow."
Yes, I have people ask me that, and I'm not in a relationship, so I go on dates, and sometimes people say, "What do you see in me?" I go, "You don't want me to." I can't just. I mean, when I look at people, I kind of look for the good things, but when for work, I'm looking for the bad things. So, and I say I don't do that. That's
Well, there's a good question, more along the lines of emotion and loss. What about grieving?
yeah. I mean, it can. So sometimes it can help a real lot with grieving because I can connect to the past souls and tell the people what's going on. And you know,
Almost in like a mediumship way.
kind of like that, but I don't particularly like that word. But because it's more like looking at it instead of chat. It's not like channeling things.
Well, could you explain that a little bit? Just elaborate on that. What are you doing in the process to
one thing in my process, I don't narrow down what I do. So I'm
Okay.
open to everything. And
Okay.
it's really, how do I be of service to that person and help them?
So in case of the grieving, you said connect to the old soul. How
Yeah,
would you?
sometimes I can see or get messages
Okay.
from passed on people.
So he's basically like, to put this down into very simplistic, you're almost like the telephone.
kind
between
of.
whatever's going on. You don't know what the messages are, what's going to come or happen, and
Right.
but you're the device that's being used by whatever that's
It's
creating
kind of
making
like
things
that, but
happen.
it's yeah, someone called it being a vessel, and I kind of like that better than being a channel or a medium for some reason. And but it sometimes it is like that. So there was one time this woman was talking to me, and she had a few sessions, and her husband kind of died out of nowhere, and she asked me about the keys, and he said they're in the drawer. And then she said, "What drawer?" I said, "I don't know. He's saying you know what the drawer is." And she looked at me like this. And then the next time we talked, she goes, after we got off, I realized, and that's where the keys were. So,
Uh,
those are kind of
that's
fun things.
that's something. But big picture wise, because I like talking about this too. The everybody has different beliefs, and it's who we are as human
Yeah.
beings. I don't come from a religious background, so I like when you talk about, again, the quantum physics angle, and just, you didn't refer to, you said God, or what was the phrase you used?
Source. Yeah.
I like that because it may just be a different word for the same thing, and that
Yeah.
it's whatever. But I tend to believe that energy, we're all energy based beings.
Yeah.
The universe is nothing but energy, dark matter, all these different things that
Yeah.
we don't even know how that works, or dark matter, or what it means. I tend to believe that if God is God, that maybe it is almost like the Matrix. It's just one big
Yeah.
energy, and there is a rhyme and reason to the construct and the way it all works out in the end. Maybe not the middle, but
Yeah, I'd like to think so. There's so many ways to talk about it, but I know and when people work with me, they just get this sense of peace. And that part is, and sometimes can look at things that are pretty disturbing and not feel so disturbed about it, which is,
but but your feelings on your experience and the things you do, and this is just a random question.
yeah.
When you pass and I pass, what happens? Do you go someplace, or do you become part of the collective? Do you go and come back? Can you tune in? Like, what is your opinion on
My
whatever
opinion is
happens?
those things, sometimes we come back. So, but it's not who we think of us as, it's not the same. Sometimes there is part of it that's kind of like a collective, because sometimes when people ask me to connect to someone, and I say to them, you have to remember they're not a physical being. They're just
Right.
really their positive qualities a whole lot more. And sometimes people are saying, "Oh, I feel sorry for this." And the being there is going, they don't even care about it, whatever disturbances were in this lifetime. So,
So what kind of things are you working on now? You're still doing the healing. What
yes.
other types of things do you do? Do
I
like
do. I try to do interviews like this. I actually been getting a little more serious about writing my story, which is good. So I, I'm hoping in the next handful of months, my first book will be done. So it tells all my story about with the sheikh, and I had other things where I just happened to meet teachers, and there was the sheikh it's an Islamic teacher, but kind of a mystical Islamic. There was a Hindi teacher, a Jewish teacher, so I got to study all these different things, but all of them had this thing for love, and all of them, even though they're kind of religious people, they talk in the way like spiritual people do, like there's no delineation spiritually, like, and they talk about the different saints from different religions. They're not caring, you know that loving and that healing and the caring and the knowing. That's what they're looking for.
well, speaking spiritually, you
Yeah.
had mentioned about that case you're working on where someone had an attachment to them and you didn't even know, but you saw it and you
Yeah.
got rid of it. Have you ever Can you tap into the energy of an environment, of a building, and
Yeah.
feel that energy as well being a little off, and knowing that there's an issue with the energy within like a household? Or
Yes.
what does that feel like to you? How do you know? What is the
Again, there's so many different things. So the so my sister's a realtor, and she's in Greenwich, Connecticut, a lot of wealthy people. And for years I was always saying, you got to hook me up with your clients. And then one time at a family dinner, she said, "Do you do house clearings?" I said, yes. And she said, I have 2 houses. And I said, great, I'll do it. And she kept saying, do you need the address? And I don't need the address because I can kind of tune into it through her, I guess.
Wow.
But she kept saying, do you need the address? So I said, yes. When she gave me one of the addresses, this purple ball of light came in, and it was like, wow, that house was done already. And then she got an offer the next day, and it sold. She didn't tell me, and I didn't find out till much later. They had been trying to sell that house on and off for years, and it wasn't selling, and that was really cool.
Wow, that is
That is
strange.
really
See, the
cool.
whole energy thing and
Yeah.
energy healing, it's so far out there. It's believable in a way, but in a lot of ways,
That's what we're made of.
Yeah, I know.
Why
Right,
can't
but when
it be
those things
manipulated?
sell, like the house sells, that's a thing. When someone gets better physically, emotionally, it seems more likely, well, it might be all in their head, but when something physical, that's why I kind of like that. And that's really been part of my journey. And so this phenomenal thing happened in my near-death experience, but I did not know what to think of it. So, and that's been good because I still know I don't really know. So I'm still looking to learn, but I would see things happen. So in the Sufis, they're very into roses. Okay. So they do these magical things with roses. There's ceremonies. And I was married way back then, but the Sufi did a marriage for me and my wife to be, and he did a rose ceremony. And he told me, go get some closed roses and cut the stems off and get 9 of them and bring them in a bowl of water. And during the ceremony, he had the roses and he said, put your hands like this. He put 1 rose in my hand and said, 1 is for, I don't even remember what he said. Then I dropped that rose in her hands and he added a second one. And it was back and forth till I had all 9. And then he said, drop them in the bowl of water. And I did. And the roses all opened up and the room filled with rose scent. And it was like this, right. That's like a real thing happening. There's no denying it happening.
See,
So,
that fascinates me. All that. And
yeah.
that's what fascinates me about it, because I really do, as much as a skeptic I am open to the idea of a lot of different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because nobody knows everything and you can't experience everything.
Well,
in
that's
this
why he's saying he
lifetime.
can't give you direct answers because he doesn't understand. He just knows.
Right. I kind of know. And each person's a little unique, but there is this thing that's this goodness in people that's there. There's this goodness outside. And there's, it's so I also know, when I work, I'm holding my hands up like this, which I didn't do for a long time. One of my friends said, you're forgetting about the healing power of your hand. And after that, I started holding my hands up. So I feel like right then I just felt this energy in here. And I don't, when I'm working with someone, I'm kind of looking to see what I do and what it creates. Because I don't always, sometimes I have an idea, but then I'm waiting to see if it works.
Okay.
And then so when I start to feel something, I know something's happening somewhere, and it could be someone in the audience is feeling it, or you could feel it, or it could have nothing to do. But that's, but I've learned that it probably does have something to do with it. So when I'm feeling that energy.
Well, it is fascinating. So if they want to reach you and have one of these sessions or just talk to you about what exactly it is you do, what's the best way to do that?
My website is laurencebrock.com. My phone number and WhatsApp, and you can text me there, is 732-567-6388. On my website, and my YouTube channel is Dr. Laurence Brock, so there's ways to connect and get more information through all of those.
So again, if you are interested, it's definitely something that I would try just for the sake of trying it to see.
Yeah. Well, we talked last time. If you want, let's set something up. I can come do it in person, or we could do it over.
I'll let Chris do it because I'm afraid you'll mess with my wiring and something will go wrong.
I understand, but you'll see that's never happened. So.
I'm kidding. All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
It was great to see you again.
You guys are the nicest guys. I'm so glad you're having success in your field, and I see what you're doing on Facebook. I think it's really cool. That's great.
Well,
Thank you.
Great seeing you again and talking to you again. And I hope you guys do reach out to him because I just like the way you think. I really do.
It is really the most amazing thing. And it is like observing it and being so happy to be a part of it. And when I can help someone. There actually the other day, this I had this client, and it's actually this 11-year-old girl in Croatia, and her mother reaches out to me. The girl doesn't speak English, but so she was doing much better for a while, and then the mother reached out and said, "Oh, she's not doing well again."
Hmm.
And she said, "I don't really have the money," and I understand. Some places it's the difference between the dollar and everything. So I
Right.
did a. So sometimes when I do that, I'll ask people to make a donation to a church or something, like a tithing
Okay.
kind of thing, to balance the energy in the universe. But in this case, I mean, it's a little girl, so I worked on her, and I could tell in a few minutes she's feeling better. So I said to the mother, "Ask her how she's feeling," and I could see the girl was trying not to smile,
Aw.
and she said, "I don't feel any difference." I said, "She does," and then in about 20 minutes, she said, "I feel better." And so those things are just so rewarding, and it's when you help someone, there's just something so rewarding about it. It's really cool.
And like you said, if you believe in energy and the positive energy and the negative energy, you can't put enough positive energy out into the world, to make a
Yeah.
difference. Even if it's that much, it helps.
Right. Every
We need
day,
more of that.
just smiling at someone or doing, like,
I leave that to people like you because I don't really do that, but people like you and Chris.
well, no, you do. That's the thing. You're one of the nicest guys, and
Hey, don't put that out there. These people are watching.
you have a high moral standard, which is really cool, and what you're doing and being. So my degree is in spiritual science. So you use the scientific method to prove. You don't just believe things; you prove
Right.
it. You see if it works.
But you have to have an open mind. You can
Yeah.
be as scientific as you want, but there are things that cannot be explained by science. You know that. So
Yeah.
just
Well,
have an
but if
open
you
mind.
study it and it keeps happening again and again
Exactly.
and again, then something's there, even though you don't know exactly what it is. So
Yep.
that's good.
Well, great seeing you again.
Yeah,
Great
good
talking
seeing
to
you.
you.
Thanks a lot.
What's the website again?
LaurenceBrock.com.
All right. Take care of yourself. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I like him. I do. We interviewed him
4 years
4 years ago. It was just as interesting. And again, believe, don't believe, that's up to you, me, and everybody here that's watching.
People swear by him.
I like the fact that he's very educated. I mean, the guy's a teacher and he knows quantum physics, which is, again, he's not just spewing from the I'm an energy guy. Ooh, I heal with my hands.
And he doesn't say he's doing it. He's saying that it's coming from, and he doesn't understand. Like somebody will sit there and go, you'll ask them a question and they'll sit there and they'll give you A, B, C, D, all the explanation. He's saying, no, I don't understand.
Again, I'm not
I just
100%
know.
sure if I'm on board and I believe it all because it's just me, but I do, because I'm the paranormal savior and I have the hat and the mug, all my future live streams, I'm doing this. Anybody? Anything? Anybody?
How's that?
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you probably on Monday. Do a whole wrap up of the Kalani investigation, whatever else we've been up to, the Creeper Gallery investigation. We still haven't gone over the Creeper Gallery. Maybe we'll do that on Monday. A lot of people want to know what happened after and talk about what happened that night. Very interesting indeed. If you didn't watch it, go back and watch it. But we'll talk all about that on Monday when we're back.
Have a good night. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Please, please remember to be kind. Good night.
Good night, everybody.